Hello and welcome back to my world of stuff. It's time for a new retro movie review. I'm going to take us right back to the mists of time, 1962, for a film that you might not have seen, you might not have heard of. It's called Jack the Giant Killer, not to be confused with Jack the Giant Slayer, which came out a few years ago. I'll come back to that in a moment. First of all, though, a couple of bits of housekeeping. My name is Paul Mount. This is my world of stuff. If you are new here, why not do the decent thing? Press like and subscribe. Thumbs up, leave a comment down below, as they say. You may have noticed, if you're a regular, that the title music has changed, and you will notice that the end sequence has changed, the music has changed. The reason for this is not just randomly changing the music for the hell of it, it's just that I'm suddenly getting copyright claims on the music that I've used on my titles. Now, when I picked that music, it was copyright free. It's copyright free, use it on your YouTube channels with impunity. But I think now that the channel is growing a little bit, I'm starting to attract a bit more attention, and I'm still, as I keep saying, very small fish in a very big ocean. But the channel is growing, and I think that perhaps some people are noticing that their music tracks are being used on channels which might be making a bit of money. Trust me, I'm not making a lot of money from YouTube. However, they're probably thinking, oh, we should have a bit of that. So they're suddenly deciding to claim copyright on the music that they've created, which is fair enough, but I think it's a bit unfair that people who have allowed their material to be used for free suddenly decide that they're going to make claims on it. I don't know, it's a grey area perhaps. But I've decided that I need to change the music, so I've gone onto YouTube Studio and found a selection of music which they have available, which is constantly copyright free. Hence the new music which is attached to the channel as of this video. I've tried to keep it sort of dynamic and dramatic, in keeping with the tone of the channel, dealing with sort of fantasy, adventure and science fiction and so on. I hope you approve. Why not let me know down below what you think of the new music? Second point of housekeeping, a Doctor Who video that I put up yesterday, which was discussing the rumours or lies or whatever you want to call them about the current status of Doctor Who. As I anticipated, attracted a lot of attention, but not a lot compared to... There are YouTubers out there who've had thousands of responses and thousands of comments, and that's fine. I've had a decent amount of responses because, as I say, I'm a growing YouTube channel. I'm a little boy, and I'm growing, maturing. But as I mentioned, I did put the comments on moderate, but I felt, I don't know, I don't really like that. I think I'll open it up to comments and then I'll moderate it from the comment section, which was fine, first of all. And then, unfortunately, a few of the sort of people I didn't want to attract to the channel started chipping in with those angry comments, not constructive comments, just angry, screaming about being woke and all that sort of nonsense. And you can feel their blood pressures rising just reading their words. So I responded to a couple of them, and I thought, well, I can't firefight like this. Otherwise this section is going to devolve into just people sniping. I like Doctor Who, I think Doctor Who's crap, and that's really not what I want. So I put the comments back on moderate again, and then released them a bit later on. That seems to have filtered out some of those people who probably got frustrated because they couldn't post their comments. So I do apologise if you were trying to post a comment and during the day you weren't able to. You should be able to now, but I am still monitoring the comments, and obviously I will moderate as appropriate, and anything that's not constructive is just shouty. I'm not interested in that sort of discourse, as I've said before. And going back to the issue about the music on the videos, if you are new to the channel, if you're looking back at some of my historic videos, you might find that some of them all of a sudden go silent over the title sequences because they're the ones that are now being affected by this copyright strike. So rather than argue about it or do anything about it, I've just snipped those clips out. So if you are doing an archive tour of my videos, you might find some that it's a bit odd. It's gone quiet for a minute. That's why. Finally, I'm sure that you're all watching this video thinking, that's an extremely attractive t-shirt Paul is wearing today. It is, isn't it? It's keep taking the stuff, which, as you will know, is my catchphrase at the end of the video. Now, I'm not going to go down the merchandising route. I'm not going to start doing mugs and mouse mats and posters and all these sorts of things. But I thought this might be quite a nice little thing if anybody's interested in a different sort of t-shirt. It's not got a copyright logo or anything on it. It's not got anything you will recognize as anything other than this channel. So if you're interested in getting hold of one of these, I will put a link down in the description down below. Quite an easy link to click. Click the link, it will take you to the site where you can access one of these t-shirts. They're very reasonably priced and they're very good quality. They're not one of those ones that have transfers that you can sort of feel sticking out. It's sort of melded into the material of the t-shirt. So no obligation for you to buy, of course, just something I thought that some of you might like to wear as a mark of support to this channel as it grows. Let's talk about the film. Right, it's 1962, Jack the Giant Killer. This is a film that I said is not incredibly well known because it didn't get a high profile release in the UK, and in the back of my mind I have a feeling that it wasn't available over here until sometime later on in the 60s. I certainly saw it as a child and was captivated by it. It's in the style of, but not by, the great Ray Harryhausen. Now, genre fans will of course know the work of Ray Harryhausen from his classic films Jason of the Argonauts, Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, all the Sinbad films that he did, all those fantastic genre films, historical pieces with these incredible stop-motion animated monsters in them. And of course, stop-motion dates right back to 1933 and Willis O'Brien's original King Kong, still the benchmark for monster movies, despite the fact that it's nearly 100 years old, and of course, effects techniques have developed somewhat since then. But I've always loved stop-motion because there's something about the technique that looks unreal and unnatural, which I think befits creatures which are unreal and unnatural, whether you're talking about the skeletons that come to life in Jason of the Argonauts, or Telos, the bronze statue that comes to life in Jason of the Argonauts, or the Redosaurus that comes out of the sea, Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. All these things, they are monster creatures that are animated, and that's the magic of stop motion. They're animated frame by frame with a puppet creature on a maquette, which is moved, photographed, an extremely laborious and time-consuming process. But it creates magical screen effects that bring the unreal to the real world. And because they look slightly unreal, it makes them even more believable to me, more terrifying, because they move like unnatural creatures. They move with a strange, graceless sort of grace. And Ray Harryhausen was the absolute master at that technique. And looking back at those films now, I think it's easy to go, oh, that looks terrible, the effects look awful. They really don't. Again, it's one of those things, I suppose, that if you were there at the time and you saw these films at the time, you grew up with them, you will appreciate them more than today's CGI doused teens and kids who will watch all these films with these unrealistic looking CGI things. And CGI can do amazing things, and I'm not saying it's not incredible, but there is always, or there is often rather than always, there is often an unreality about them because there's a plastic look to them, a bendiness, a sense that you know it's CGI anyway, but it doesn't have a sense of heft to it. It doesn't feel like you can reach out and touch these things because you know they've been created and generated out of pixels on a computer. But stop motion, you know that someone in the studio had his model and was moving it painstakingly. It must have been agonizing work to do. But Ray Harryhausen was the master of it, and the effects speak for themselves on screen. Jack the Giant Killer, having said all that, isn't a Ray Harryhausen film, and that becomes sort of obvious when you watch it. If you've not seen the film, then it's very much in the classic mould of Harryhausen films, the Sinbad films and so on, Jason and the Argonauts. And it's a charming, beautifully colourful film that was made in 1960 but wasn't released until 1962 because of the length of the post-production process with the monsters. And it's a classic fairy tale story. There is a character, Jack the Giant Killer, from Cornish fairy tale, and this sort of works with those stories and updates it slightly. The film starts with a little bit of backstory about the Duchy of Cornwall, hundreds of years ago in the past, where a villainous wizard called Pendragon, who was threatening the land, was banished to an uncharted, uninhabited island by a powerful wizard. Years later, however, the wizard has died and his power over Pendragon has weakened, and Pendragon is now casting his beady eye on the Duchy of Cornwall, and he quite fancies getting a bit of that. In the duchy itself, King Mark, a very regal name, is celebrating, along with his courtiers and his people, the birthday of his daughter, Princess Elaine. Pendragon turns up under the disguise of some distant dignitary, and he gives her a birthday present, which is this ornate-looking, colourful music box. When it's opened up, this creature comes out, a grotesque sort of face, but dressed as a jester, and it's a sort of a figure that size. And it does a little merry little dance for her, and of course she's enchanted by it, and all the courtiers think it's a very lovely thing. During the night, when Princess Elaine goes to bed, all her presents are taken into her bedroom, but the evil and vicious Pendragon, he creeps up nearby through the window. He sends out little darts of magic that bring the jester creature to life inside its cabinet. And it bursts free from the cabinet, throws off its jester clothes, and becomes this hideous, grotesque giant creature called Cormoran, which smashes through the roof, grabs hold of the princess, and whisks her away. King Mark and his courtiers and guards try to fight back, but they're brushed aside, and Cormoran heads off to the beach. There he meets up with an impish creature called Garma, who has a boat ready to take Cormoran and the princess back to Pendragon's Island. But on their way back, they bump into young Jack, who's a sort of miller, a local farmer, and he engages in combat with Cormoran the giant and eventually kills him. As a reward, King Mark knights Jack and tasks him with helping Elaine travel to Normandy, where, because she's attracted the attention of Pendragon, King Mark thinks she'll be safer in exile. So they set off on a boat trip to travel to Normandy, but Pendragon will stop at nothing to get his hands on the princess and get control over the Duchy of Cornwall. It's a very simplistic and very basic heroes and villains story. Pendragon, played by Torrin Thatcher, is a black-hearted blackguard. He's a villain, he's a magician, he's an evil piece of work. Jack, played by Kerwin Matthews, is a typical macho love interest figure. He's tough and he fights and he's fearless. And the princess is played very winsomely by Judy Meredith. What happens across this film, across its 92 minutes, is just charming. And I watched this again on Blu-ray the other day, and it looks fantastic. The colours are so vivid. The sets are really spectacular. It just pops off the screen. The story, as I said, is very straightforward. Eventually, Pendragon gets his hands on the princess again and whisks her back to his castle. And Jack, with some of the people he teams up with, including a Viking and a young boy and an imp in a bottle, who I'd forgotten about actually, an extremely irritating imp character, played by Dom Beddo, who speaks in rhyme. He's a sort of a leprechaun figure who's been trapped in this bottle. And together they travel to Pendragon's Island to rescue the princess. On their way they are beset by all sorts of horrors and monstrosities and terrible things. And it ends in a fantastic battle between Jack and Pendragon, who has transformed himself into a dragon. It's a fantastic film. It is great fun. I've seen this not so long ago, in fact, and rewatching it again. I remembered how much it enchanted and captivated me as a child. I must have seen it in the late 60s, maybe early 70s. It's hard to remember. As I say, in the back of my mind, there was some history of it not being released in the UK. There was certainly a delay in it being released in America. But it is such a beautiful, naive, exciting film. This film came about because of the success of The Seven Voyages of Sinbad that came out a couple of years ago, with Sinbad played by Kerwin Matthews. This film was to capitalise on that, but unfortunately they weren't able to capitalise on the Ray Harryhausen special effects. Ray wasn't available, or he was too expensive, and they enlisted the aid of Howard A. Anderson's company for the very impressive and quite numerous sort of optical effects. There's lots of colourful halos and bolts of colourful light, and it's very, very optical in that sense. Well, the physical effects were all done by a company called Project Unlimited. They recently won an Oscar for the classic George Powell Time Machine, and incidentally one of their employees at the time was Jim Danforth, a legendary name in special effects. He went on to work on films like When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth. He had worked on 1 Million Years BC and Clash of the Titans. He worked on a lot of that sort of stop motion stuff in the 70s and into the 80s. But the effects are a bit cut price compared to Ray Harryhausen. However, they are largely, and in places, extremely impressive. I think particularly Cormoran, that first sequence. I mean, I think they must have concentrated on making that sequence as good as it could be because it looks great. Cormoran is a ferocious-looking, monstrous-looking thing with this big horn, which is cleverly hidden under this jester's hat when he first appears as a dancing doll. But he looks genuinely nasty and threatening, and the scenes where he captures the princess, she becomes then an animated doll in his hand, which is quite well done, rampaging through the courtyard of the palace, knocking guards aside, crashing through doors. That's all really well done. And his battle with Jack is excellent, especially in the sequence which I remember wincing at as a child, where Jack is fighting Cormoran around this mill near the sea, and Cormoran puts his hand through the door of the mill and he's crushed by the wheel that rolls around from the mill, and he pulls his hand out and it's sort of bruised and bloodied. And I always remember sort of wincing at that because that was sort of seemed quite gruesome in a strange way. Later on we get some more stop motion things. Towards the end particularly, I think there must have been issues with the budget, because at the end when they're trying to escape from Pendragon's Island, another two-headed giant appears, which suddenly reminds you, oh yes, it's Jack the Giant Killer. We've only had one giant so far. And this is a two-headed thing which isn't quite as detailed, and the effects are a little bit more jarring. Worst of all, however, is this octopus-like sea creature which comes out of the sea, which seriously looks as if somebody just had a lump of putty, fashioned it into a crude head with a mouth and some flashing tentacles. It's a rotten-looking model. It's animated well enough, and it has a battle with the giant, which is quite effective. But the actual puppet or model is pretty basic and raw. The best effects for me, however, those optical digital type things, particularly the witches, which are Pendragon's sort of servant creatures. And there's a scene in the film where the longboat that's taking Elaine and Jack to Normandy is attacked by witches. There's a great scene. Witches in the air, witches on the starboard bow. And these creatures, they're not sort of witches as you classically think of witches. They're these monstrosities, these things covered in rags, carrying tridents. And the effect makes them actually quite terrifying. Even today, you watch them and think, that's really very effective and very eerie. They're covered with this sort of phosphorescent optical glow around them, and they make a sort of shrieking sound. One of them opens its mouth and this wind comes out which throws everybody off balance, and they're flying through the air. And the flying sequence is very well done because they're matted over the location footage and flying around, landing on the ship, prowling on the ship. Actually, very, very eerie, very, very creepy, and very effective for a film made in 1960. It's just great fun. All the performances are so earnest and so determined. Everybody's determined to have a good time making this film. Kerwin Matthews, as I mentioned, he was a big star of these sorts of films at the time, and he is very much the alpha male macho hero. Torrin Thatcher as Pendragon, fantastic performance. He played this sort of role in lots of different films over the years, and I always think of him as a template for Anthony Ainley's version of the Master. He has that look with that beard, the slick back hair. Not the Roger Delgado Master, but very much the Anthony Ainley Master that was to an extent aping Roger Delgado's Master. But he has that sort of pantomime villain look about him because of his costume, his multicoloured costume, and his henchman played by Walter Burke as Garner, just in these velvet sort of costumes. It's a great fun film. It's directed by Nathan Juran. Now, he did a lot of fantasy films. He started off doing lots of thrillers, adventure films, and then he moved more into science fiction type things. Although I don't think he was particularly a fan of science fiction, but he seemed to have an eye for it. And in the 60s, you might know the name if you're an Irwin Allen fan. His name cropped up in virtually all the Irwin Allen films as director of things like Lost in Space, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, Time Tunnel, and so on. And of course, he directed Seventh Voyage of Sinbad a couple of years before. So he was in this genre. He knew how to make it work. And it is very well directed. It's a silly, hokey fantasy film, but it's really well directed. It's got a good pace to it. Doesn't mess about, just gets on with it. And it looks really good. I think you watch it now for the first time, I think you'll be taken in by the story, which is just very, as I say, it's very basic. Bad guy, hero, monsters. What more do you want, really? It's a really great fun film. And if you can set aside any criticisms about the way it looks, then I think you'll have a good time with it. It just looks great. As I said, I watched it on Blu-ray on the big screen, and the colours are so vivid and colourful. It's really well put together. The sets are fantastic. The production design is really on point. It's just great fun. The monsters, some of them are good, some aren't so good, but there are plenty of them. It just never stops. It's always moving, and there's always something going on the screen. But as I say, the standout moment is the scene with the witches, which is generally very, very eerie. So that's Jack the Giant Killer, which is available on Blu-ray. You can pick it up quite easily. I don't know if it's on a streaming service. It may be on YouTube, I don't know. But I really suggest you can pick it up quite cheaply from Amazon on Blu-ray. Highly, highly recommended. Right, I think that's it from me for now. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video and enjoyed this little retro look back at one of the lesser remembered fantasy films of the 60s. If you have, then you know what to do, don't you? Like and subscribe to the channel. That's the main thing to do. Subscribe to the channel. I think we're now at 68% of viewers aren't subscribers, which does my head in. But you know what to do. Just subscribe to the channel. Like, leave a comment, and don't forget the t-shirts. There's a link down below if you want one. There's absolutely no obligation. Right, I will see you soon with some more genre stuff. Until I do, keep taking the stuff.